You pulled into the lot, turned the headlights off, and waited. A voice crackled through the speaker box, or maybe a girl on roller skates came to your window, and you ordered the same thing you ordered every Friday night. It cost you less than $2 for the whole tray. The wax paper crinkled, the root beer sweated through the paper cup, and whatever you bit into that night does not exist on a menu anywhere in this country today. Number 18 on this list had no egg in it and no cream in it, and half the country never even heard of it. And number 8 was not just a drink. It was the reason you drove past 3 other places to get to the one that made it right. These were the foods that kept the drive-in alive, and when the drive-in died, they died with it. Here are 25 famous drive-in snacks that vanished after the 1970s. Number 25, cherry phosphate. Before every soda fountain got replaced by a self-serve machine, there was a drink that required a human being to make it. Cherry phosphate started with a squirt of acid phosphate, a bitter mineral solution that pharmacists kept behind the counter. The soda jerk added cherry syrup, carbonated water, and sometimes a squeeze of fresh lime. The acid phosphate gave it a dry, tart bite that no modern cherry soda has come close to. It had an edge, almost like a cocktail without the alcohol. Kids ordered it like it was contraband. When the drugstore soda fountain closed, acid phosphate disappeared from suppliers, and cherry phosphate went with it. Number 24. Fried clam roll. This was a New England drive-in original that never made it past the Connecticut border. Fresh clam bellies, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, fried until the edges curled and stuffed into a split-top hot dog bun with tartar sauce and a squeeze of lemon. Howard Johnson's put fried clams on the national map in the 1930s, and by the 1960s, every roadside stand from Maine to the Massachusetts coast had its own version. The whole belly was the point. Strips meant the cook was cutting corners, or the supplier had run dry. The places that used whole bellies said so on the sign out front. When the big chains moved in and the independents shut down, the fried clam roll pulled back to the same coastal towns where it started. You can still find one if you drive far enough north, but the drive-in version, handed to you on a paper tray through a car window, is gone. Before I go further, for the folks who want more recipes like these all gathered in one place, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. It is a cookbook with the kinds of recipes you will not find in any modern publication. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not mention it again. If you want it, it is there. Now, back to the list. Number 23. Loose meat sandwich. A handful of seasoned ground beef, crumbled and browned in its own fat, spooned onto a soft hamburger bun with pickles, mustard, and diced onion. No patty, no press, no shape at all. The meat sat loose on the bread, and half of it fell into the wax paper before you finished. Drive-ins across Iowa and the Midwest sold these from the 1930s straight through the 1960s, and the counter version came so fast you barely had time to sit down. The seasoning was simple, just salt, pepper, and a little Worcestershire stirred into the skillet. Some places added a splash of beef broth to keep it moist. It was the kind of sandwich that cost almost nothing to assemble and tasted better than it had any right to. When chains moved in with their pressed and frozen patties, the loose meat sandwich lost its place on the board because no corporate kitchen wanted to explain why the meat was not shaped. Number 22. Butterscotch sundae. Every drive-in with a soft serve machine had a butterscotch sauce made from real butter and brown sugar, cooked on a stovetop until it turned dark and thick. It went over 2 scoops of vanilla in a fluted glass dish, topped with a single maraschino cherry. Butterscotch was not caramel. Caramel is sugar and cream. Butterscotch is butter and brown sugar, and the difference is everything. It has a round, almost smoky sweetness that sits on the back of your tongue. When the chains took over and started buying sauce in bulk, butterscotch got replaced by caramel because caramel was cheaper to manufacture and easier to pump from a dispenser. Nobody held a funeral for it. It just stopped showing up. Number 21. Cottage cheese and fruit plate. If you think this sounds like diet food, you did not eat at a drive-in in 1965. A scoop of full-fat cottage cheese sat in the middle of a sectioned plate, surrounded by canned peach halves, a handful of grapes, a wedge of cantaloupe, and a few maraschino cherries. Some places added a scoop of sherbet. It was the thing your mother ordered while your father got a cheeseburger, and she ate every bite without apology. The cottage cheese was whole milk, not the low-fat version that took over in the 1980s. It tasted like something. Drive-ins dropped it when the menu shrank to burgers, fries, and chicken strips. The drive-in was never just a restaurant. It was a parking lot with a kitchen, and that kitchen answered to nobody. No corporate office told the owner what to put on the menu. No supplier contract forced him to use frozen patties or pre-mixed sauces. The menu was whatever he knew how to make, whatever his wife brought from home, whatever sold last Friday night. That is why every drive-in in America had a different menu. The one on Route 66 outside Tulsa served tamale spreads. The one on the Coast Highway in Connecticut served fried clams. The one in Central Illinois served a sandwich made from something most people today would not believe. They were all different because they were all independent, and independence was the first thing to go when the franchise model arrived. Number 20. Pig Hip Sandwich. This was a Springfield, Illinois original, and unless you grew up within 100 miles of the State House, you probably never heard of it. A pork butt was slow roasted for hours, sliced thin, and piled onto a bun with mustard and pickles. The name came from the cut, which sat near the hip of the hog. Drive-ins around Springfield served it alongside horseshoe sandwiches and cold root beer, and locals treated it the way Philadelphia treats the cheesesteak. It was identity food. When the independent drive-ins in Central Illinois closed through the 1970s and 1980s, the pig hip retreated to a few diners and church suppers. It never made it onto a franchise menu because it required a real roast, real time, and a cook who knew what he was looking at. Number 19. Tamale Spread Sandwich. This is one of the strangest things that ever sat on a drive-in tray, and it was popular in parts of the Midwest and the South from the 1930s through the 1960s. A tamale spread was exactly what it sounds like. Canned tamales, mashed into a paste with a fork, spread onto white bread like peanut butter, and sometimes topped with shredded cheese and a squirt of mustard. Some places heated it on the flat grill until the bread toasted and the spread got hot. Others served it cold, straight out of the can. It sounds rough, and it was rough, but it cost almost nothing. It filled you up, and it had a smoky, spiced flavor that was hard to forget. The tamale itself had been a street food in American cities since the late 1800s. Hot tamale vendors pushed carts through neighborhoods in Chicago, Los Angeles, San Antonio, and Memphis. By the 1920s, companies like Denison's and Wolf Brand were canning tamales and selling them in grocery stores for pennies. The spread version was an invention born from those cans. You could not always get fresh tamales, but you could always get a can. And a can of tamales, a loaf of bread, and a flat grill was all a drive-in needed to put a hot sandwich on the menu without any special training. The sandwich never made it into a cookbook. It never got a write-up in a food magazine. It lived on hand-painted menu boards and in the muscle memory of short-order cooks who learned it from the guy before them. When the drive-ins closed, nobody thought to save the recipe because nobody thought of it as a recipe. It was just something you did with a can of tamales and 2 slices of bread. Number 18. Egg cream. No egg, no cream. Just chocolate syrup, whole milk, and seltzer water, mixed in a specific order in a tall glass with a long spoon. The chocolate went in first, then the milk, then the seltzer hit hard enough to build a foamy head that looked like a cappuccino. Egg creams were a New York City invention, born in Brooklyn soda fountains sometime around the turn of the century. By the 1950s, every candy store and luncheonette in the 5 boroughs served them, and drive-ins along the East Coast picked them up as a menu novelty. The seltzer cut the sweetness and gave it a sharp, almost savory edge. Fox's You Bet syrup was the only acceptable brand. When the soda fountains closed and the drive-ins followed, the egg cream became a memory that only New Yorkers carried. Number 17. Brown Derby Sandwich, not named after the restaurant, named after the hat. This was a hot turkey sandwich served open-faced on white bread, smothered in gravy, with mashed potatoes on the side. Some drive-ins added cranberry sauce, some piled on stuffing. The version you got depended on who was running the kitchen that day. It was Thanksgiving on a plate, available any Tuesday in June. The Brown Derby required real roasted turkey, not the processed deli slices that came later. When drive-ins switched to faster proteins, the Brown Derby lost its spot. It took too long, it needed gravy, and gravy needed a cook who showed up early. Number 16. Lime Ricky. A squeeze of fresh lime juice, a shot of simple syrup, and carbonated water. No artificial flavor, no premixed concentrate, no neon green color. The Lime Ricky was clear, fizzy, tart, and cold, and it was the summer drink at drive-ins where the owner squeezed his own limes. It originated in Washington, D.C., reportedly at a bar called Shoemakers in the 1880s, and spread through soda fountains and drive-ins across the East Coast and Midwest. The key was the fresh lime. Bottled juice did not work. When drive-ins started buying their drinks pre-mixed from syrup distributors, the Lime Ricky died quietly because you cannot put fresh lime juice in a bag-in-box system. Number 15. Frenchie. A grilled cheese sandwich dipped in egg batter and deep fried until the outside puffed golden and the cheese inside turned into a molten pocket. The King's Food Host chain in the Midwest built a following around this one item through the 1960s and early 1970s. You could get a Frenchie for pocket change, and the combination of crispy batter and stretchy American cheese made it the kind of thing kids begged for on the drive home from school. The sandwich had no pretense. White bread, processed cheese, egg wash, hot oil. When the chain folded, the Frenchie went with it, and nobody else picked it up because deep frying a grilled cheese sounded like a joke until you tasted one. A few diners in Nebraska and Iowa still make a version, but the original Frenchie, wrapped in foil and handed through a window, belongs to a drive-in world that does not exist anymore. What replaced these snacks was not better food, it was faster food. The franchise model demanded consistency, and consistency demanded a menu that any teenager could execute in under 3 minutes with no training. That meant frozen patties, pre-portioned condiments, heat lamp holding trays, and a fryer basket that accepted only one shape of chicken. The independent drive-in cook who slow-roasted a pork butt or squeezed fresh limes or knew how to build a tamale spread was not inefficient. He was inconvenient. His food could not be replicated in 10,000 locations at once, and that made him a problem. So the food that required skill and knowledge and a human hand disappeared, and what remained was a menu designed not to taste good, but to taste the same everywhere. Number 14. Chicken in the basket. Before the Colonel turned fried chicken into a cardboard bucket operation, drive-ins served it in a red plastic basket lined with wax paper alongside crinkle-cut fries and a small cup of coleslaw. The chicken was fried to order, not held under a heat lamp, not pre-breaded in a factory and shipped frozen. The cook dredged the pieces in seasoned flour, dropped them into a cast-iron skillet or a deep pot of lard, and pulled them out when the crust turned the right shade of brown. There was no timer. The cook just knew. Every drive-in had its own seasoning. Some used garlic salt and paprika, some added cayenne, some soaked the chicken in buttermilk overnight, and the regulars swore they could taste the difference between a Tuesday batch and a Saturday batch. Chicken in the basket was a drive-in event. It took longer than a burger, and the drive-in charged more for it, so ordering it meant you were staying a while. You parked under the canopy, rolled the windows down, and waited. When it came on the tray, the basket was hot, the chicken was too hot to hold, and the fries were salted while still wet from the fryer. The franchise chains killed it by undercutting the price. A bucket from a national chain cost less than a drive-in basket because the chain used pressure fryers, frozen pre-portioned pieces, and a supply chain that negotiated chicken prices by the millions of pounds. The independent drive-in could not compete on cost. It could only compete on taste, and taste lost when the other guy had a billboard on the interstate. Number 13. Olive Burger. A Michigan specialty that never crossed the state line. A standard hamburger patty on a bun. topped with a sauce made from chopped green olives mixed into mayonnaise. Some versions used cream cheese instead of mayo. The olive burger was a fixture at drive-ins in Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, and the small towns in between, and ordering one anywhere else in the country got you a blank stare. The brine from the olives cut through the fat of the burger the way a pickle does, but sharper and more complex. When the Michigan drive-ins closed, the olive burger held on at a few local restaurants that understood what they had. But as a drive-in snack, it is gone. Number 12. Fried pie, not baked, fried. A half moon of pie dough, filled with cooked apples or peaches or sweet potato, sealed at the edges with a fork and dropped into the same oil that fried the chicken. The crust came out blistered and golden, with a shatter when you bit through it and a filling that could burn the roof of your mouth if you were not careful. Fried pies were a Southern tradition long before they hit the drive-in, but the drive-in made them portable. You ate one with one hand while steering with the other. McDonald's sold a version for years, but they switched to baking in the 1990s, and the baked version was a different thing entirely. The real fried pie, the one with the blistered crust and the molten center, left when the independent drive-ins left. Number 11, steak sandwich. Not a cheesesteak, not a frozen beef product, an actual thin-cut piece of beef, pounded flat, seasoned with salt and pepper, seared on a flat grill, and laid on a hoagie roll with grilled onions and a slice of American cheese. Some drive-ins used cube steak, some used minute steak. Either way, it was real beef, cooked fast and served hot, and it cost more than a hamburger but less than a sit-down dinner. The steak sandwich was a payday order. You got one when you could afford it. When fast food chains needed to keep every item under a set price, real steak left the menu because a single portion of real beef could not hit the number. Number 10. Breaded pork tenderloin sandwich. A pork cutlet pounded so thin you could almost see through it, dredged in flour, egg, and cracker crumbs, then fried in a cast-iron skillet until the breading turned golden brown. The meat hung over the edges of a soft white bun by 2 or 3 inches on every side. That overhang was the whole selling point. Drive-ins across Indiana, Iowa, and Illinois built their reputations on this sandwich alone, and every cook had an opinion about the breading. Some used saltine crackers crushed with a rolling pin. Others swore by seasoned flour and nothing else. You ordered it with pickles, mustard, and a slice of raw onion, and the bun was almost an afterthought because the cutlet did all the talking. The pork had to be fresh and pounded by hand that morning. When suppliers started shipping pre-formed frozen patties in the late 1970s, the independents who refused to use them could not compete on price. One by one, the drive-ins that served the real thing closed their lots. The frozen version never tasted the same, and the places still making it by hand today are a long drive from anywhere. Number 9. Onion burger. Oklahoma invented this during the Depression, and the drive-ins made it famous. A ball of ground beef was placed on a hot, flat grill, and a fistful of thinly sliced onions was pressed into the top with a spatula. Then the whole thing got flipped so the onions were on the bottom, searing directly on the griddle. The onions caramelized, the beef cooked in the onion steam, and the edges went thin and crispy while the center stayed soft. The result tasted like twice the meat because the onions added so much body. It cost less because onions were cheaper than beef. When the pre-formed frozen patty became the standard, the onion burger vanished because you cannot press fresh onions into a frozen disc. Nobody talks about the car as a dining room, but that is what it was. Your car was the only restaurant in America where you chose the music, controlled the temperature, picked your company, and nobody rushed you. The dashboard was your table. The glove box held your napkins. The bench seat was wide enough for 3, and if you were on a date, it was wide enough for 2 sitting close. The food was designed for that space. It came on trays that hooked to the door. It came in wax paper that caught the crumbs. It came in cups that fit the hand, not a holder, because there were no cup holders yet. The food fit the car, and the car fit the moment. And when the drive-in closed, the car just became a car again. Number 8. Root beer float. This was not a novelty. This was the anchor of every drive-in menu in the country. and the places that made it right were the places that lasted longest. The root beer came from a barrel or a tap connected to a local bottler. Not a syrup box. Real root beer, brewed with sassafras or wintergreen or birch bark depending on the region. A frosted glass mug came out of the freezer. The root beer went in first, and then a scoop of hard vanilla ice cream dropped in, and the foam erupted over the rim. The float worked because of temperature contrast. The root beer was cold, the ice cream was colder. Where they met, the root beer froze into a thin shell around the scoop, and you had to break through that shell with a long spoon to get to the soft ice cream underneath. The foam on top was sweet and bitter at the same time, and drinking the last inch of melted root beer and ice cream at the bottom of the mug was the best part. A&W built a brand around the float. Dog N Suds did the same. Stewart's, Hires, Frostop. Every one of them had a drive-in where you ordered a float in a frosted mug, and the car hop brought it on a tray. When those places closed, the float survived in theory. You can make one at home. But the frosted mug, the tray on the car door, the condensation running down the glass while the AM station played through the speaker box, that version is gone. Number 7. Frito chili pie in the bag. You walked up to the window, bought a small bag of Fritos, and the cook slit the bag open along the side, ladled hot chili right into it, piled on shredded cheddar and diced raw onion, and handed it back with a plastic fork. You ate it standing up in the parking lot. No plate, no bowl, no table. The bag was the dish. This started in Texas and spread to every drive-in where Fritos and a pot of chili overlapped, which by the 1960s was most of the Southwest. The chili was different everywhere. Some places made it thick and beanless, others used kidney beans and enough cayenne to make your eyes water. The corn chips never went soggy because that is what corn does. It holds. When the franchise manuals took over, the Frito pie vanished because no corporate kitchen was going to cut open a bag from a competing snack company and ladle soup into it. The health codes alone would have buried it. Number 6. Hot ham and cheese, sliced ham from an actual deli slicer, not a vacuum-sealed packet. American cheese, 2 slices of white bread or a soft roll. Pressed on the flat grill until the bread browned and the cheese melted around the edges. No lettuce, no tomato, no special sauce. The hot ham and cheese was the fastest thing a cook could make besides a hamburger, and it outsold most of the menu on any given Tuesday because it was cheap and warm and nobody had to think about it. It was a reflex order. Drive-ins dropped it when the menu shrank to burgers, chicken, and fish, and nobody noticed until it was too late to bring back. Number 5. Curb service barbecue sandwich. In the South and parts of the Midwest, drive-ins doubled as barbecue joints. A pork shoulder smoked since dawn, pulled or chopped, piled onto a cheap white bun with coleslaw on top and a vinegar sauce that soaked through the bottom before you finished paying. The smoke smell hit you in the parking lot from 2 blocks away. These were not barbecue restaurants. They were drive-ins that happened to have a pit out back, and the cook who ran the pit usually worked the fryer too. When health codes tightened and building inspections separated cooking operations from open flame, a lot of those pits got shut down. The barbecue left, the drive-in survived on burgers alone for a while, and then the drive-in left too. The word vanished in the title of this video is not a metaphor. These foods did not evolve into something better. They did not get updated or reinvented or given a modern twist by a chef with a podcast. They stopped being made. The people who made them retired or died. The equipment they used got sold at auction. The recipes they never wrote down stayed unwritten. A vanished food is not the same as an old food. An old food can come back. A vanished food needs someone to remember it first, and the generation that remembers is the generation watching right now. Number 4. Frosted malt, not a milkshake. A malt. The difference was malted milk powder, a barley-based ingredient that gave the drink a toasty, almost nutty flavor that a plain milkshake could not touch. The frosted version was thicker than a regular malt because the ice cream ratio was higher, and the whole thing was mixed longer until it turned into something closer to soft serve than a drink. You needed a spoon, not a straw. Drive-ins served frosted malts in tall stainless steel cups that held more than the glass, and the extra stayed on the side. That second pour was the reward. By the time you reached it, it was nearly frozen solid. When ingredients got cheaper, the malt was replaced by the shake, and the shake was replaced by whatever comes out of a machine today. Number 3. Footlong chili dog. 12 inches of hot dog in a steamed bun, split down the middle, filled with homemade chili, diced white onions, and a line of yellow mustard from one end to the other. The dog hung over both sides of the tray. You could not eat it without leaning forward and letting the chili drip onto the wax paper. Drive-ins sold these cheap, and the margin was almost nothing, but they kept making them because the footlong brought people in. It was a spectacle. A kid saw one go past on a tray and pointed, and the next order was 2 more. When the drive-ins closed and the hot dog moved into gas stations, the footlong survived as a sad plastic roller version with no chili, no bun steam, and no reason to cross town. Number 2. Car Hop Special Plate. Every drive-in had one. It went by different names. The number 1, the house plate, the special. It was a combination platter that gave you a little of everything the kitchen could do. A small burger or a barbecue sandwich, a handful of fries, a cup of slaw, a fried pie or a scoop of ice cream, and a drink. The price was less than ordering each item on its own, and the plate was the cook's way of showing off. This is what I make. Try all of it. When the drive-in became a franchise, the combination platter became a numbered value meal, and the story it told was not about a cook. It was about a supply chain. Number 1, the flat-top hamburger, not a quarter-pounder, not a flame-broiled anything. A ball of fresh ground beef, never frozen, pressed onto a screaming hot flat grill with a spatula until the edges went dark and lacy and the center stayed pink. A soft white bun, maybe toasted on the same grill. A swipe of mustard, a few pickles, and one thin slice of onion. Nothing else. This was the original drive-in food. Before the chicken baskets and the tamale spreads and the fried pies, there was a flat-top hamburger in wax paper on a tray hooked to your car door. It was made by a person you could see through the window. It smelled like yours before it arrived, and it tasted like the place it came from, because every flat-top grill carried the seasoning of every burger that had ever been cooked on it. No two were the same, and that is exactly what we lost. So let's say you were in one of those super hot states and you just didn't feel like greasing up your day to hell and back with all those fried fats and oils. Chicken buckets definitely weren't for you, but a frozen shake just wasn't cutting it either. You needed a real dessert, so what would you go for? Let me introduce you to the apple pie a la mode, which actually goes all the way back to the 1900s. The story goes something like this. Apparently, a New York diner once served a customer who combined their ice cream with the pie. This inspired the idea behind apple pie a la mode. It slowly started becoming a niche way of having a pie that slowly exploded in popularity and found itself some real dedicated fans, and by the 1960s, Americans were fully in their bag with all kinds of food experimentation and pairing warm desserts with cold sides. Another big reason why this pie was such a nightmare for its competitors was because it was priced literally the same as one of those creamsicle shakes we just talked about. You get a pie and ice cream to go with it for 75 cents, and it doesn't take a nuclear physicist to figure out how a business model like that goes nationwide. The apple pie was already something deeply rooted in American culture anyway, so this neat little variation only helped cement its legacy further. Also, the idea itself is just genius. Seriously, it's like giving steroids to food. The pie tastes unimaginably better if you just pair it up with some ice cream. And as I said before, it really takes the edge off in states where the temperature gets high. Number 19, spaghetti with meat sauce. This one surprises people. Italian food at a truck stop. But in the 1970s, spaghetti with meat sauce sat on more truck stop menus than pot roast, and it outsold most daily specials by the end of the week. The reason was simple. Ground beef was cheap, canned tomato sauce was cheaper, dried spaghetti noodles cost almost nothing. A cook could feed 40 drivers out of one stock pot and still have leftovers for the morning crew. The sauce started with ground beef browned in a heavy pot with onions and garlic. Then cans of tomato sauce went in, sometimes a can of tomato paste to thicken it, and a shake of Italian seasoning from a jar on the shelf. The spaghetti was boiled in a separate pot, drained and plated with a ladle of meat sauce on top and a sprinkle of Parmesan from a green shaker can. A basket of garlic bread came with it, not real garlic bread. Sliced white bread, buttered and dusted with garlic salt, then run under the broiler until the edges browned. The whole plate cost $1.65 at a truck stop outside of Knoxville in 1976, and the drivers scraped the plate clean with the last piece of bread. The sauce held on the back burner all day, and the noodles sat in a steam tray, and assembling a plate took less than 2 minutes. For a kitchen running on one cook and one waitress, that speed was everything. Spaghetti night was the one night a driver could eat without worrying whether the cook knew what he was doing. You cannot ruin spaghetti! How can we play the Diner's Greatest Hits album and skip root beer floats? Arguably the most influential track on the whole project, this drink combined the spicy tang of root beer with a very smooth, thick scoop of vanilla ice cream, which led to it becoming one of the most popular items at diners and soda fountains. By the way, here's a bit of an unrelated cultural fact for you. While diner culture was popping off, so were soda fountains as an industry, so root beer floats all in all had every bit of support and momentum. They used that pretty well too. Otherwise, they wouldn't become the cultural phenomena they are today. Frank J. Wisner is the first person we can thank the root beer float for. He was the owner of Cripple Creek Brewing, and apparently he's the one who made the first root beer float. From there on, diners, bars, and ice cream parlors would perfect the technique to make a flawless float. Most agreed on one fundamental rule, which was that you really needed to nail the balance of vanilla ice cream and the root beer. Too much drink would take away from the texture of the ice cream, but too much ice cream would mess with the flavor of the drink. It was also family-friendly because it was just root beer. You could kind of drink with dad and mom that way, which meant that a lot of families used floats at diners as a nice little bonding experience. You know how you go to a Nando's and they have bottomless drinks? Well, some diners did that with floats back then, which made it even more successful. Number 23. Chicken pot pie. A single-serve pie in a foil tin with a flaky crust on top and a thick filling of chicken, peas, carrots, and diced potatoes in a cream sauce underneath. Some truck stops made them from scratch. Most used frozen ones from a food service supplier and baked them off a dozen at a time. Either way, you cracked through the top crust with a fork and the steam rolled out carrying the smell of chicken broth and butter. A pot pie took 20 minutes to eat because the filling stayed volcanic hot in the center long after the crust cooled down. Drivers learned to eat from the edges in. Everything was sealed inside that crust, and that made it the safest bet on the menu if you were worried about a cook cutting corners. You know, we mentioned burgers, fried chicken, shakes, and even pies, but there's still one more member of the original crew we're missing: onion rings. Just like you can't have a Transformers movie without Bumblebee, you can't get a diner going if you don't know how to make onion rings. The earliest recipe I could find for onion rings was actually from a 1933 New York Times article, which was a pretty basic recipe. The classic onion ring evolved into ditching cornmeal later on, but the 1933 one had a lot of the stuff in the batter. Right after 1933, it didn't really take long for onion rings to become another must-have fast food item if you were going for a main meal like a burger. The thing about fast food is that a lot of it is built around one item. You get a burger or you get fried chicken. Okay, so you obviously need sides and a drink, right? So what if you only have fries? Gets a bit stale eventually. You switch it up with golden crisp onion rings worth barely a meager 25 cents, and whether you're in Texas or California, you can always trust in the quality. Chains like Dairy Queen had some of the best onion rings around, and drive-ins and diners would do promotional meals centered around onion rings, such as combo baskets or side swap Wednesdays, which let customers swap between either fries as a side or onion rings. Deals really go a long way, you know. Number 25. Turkey dinner plate. Sliced roast turkey with brown gravy, cornbread dressing, cranberry sauce from the can, and green beans that had been cooking all day with salt pork. This was not Thanksgiving. This was a Tuesday in October at a truck stop off the I-40 in Tennessee. The turkey came from a roasting pan that held 2 whole birds, and the cook carved to order until the birds ran out. The dressing was baked in a sheet pan and cut into squares. The cranberry sauce held the shape of the can, ridged and wobbling on the plate. Nobody complained. A turkey dinner plate in the middle of the week felt like a holiday, and drivers who spotted it on the specials board did not think twice. Sloppy Joes aren't just a catchy buzzword you hear in shows set in retro times, but a real showstopper that's been associated with drive-in diner culture for years and years. Not just that, since we're specifically talking about the 1960s, it was even common for people to find this as a cafeteria item in schools. It erupted most in the 50s and 60s, where there was a lot of demand for easy-to-make casual meals that worked better in social settings or as comfort food. You know, the kind of stuff you can munch on and have a good conversation with your friends at the same time. The reason Sloppy Joes became so popular, not just in drive-in diners but as a food to make at home too, was because they used a lot of convenience ingredients like canned food, which were really cheap and easy to make. You had your sauces in a bottle, some spices if you were making it at home, and everything else in a can. So, what really were you cooking? It was more assembling a meal together than any actual kind of effort. That's what made them work so well for diners too, because production was a cakewalk when it was this easy to make a Sloppy Joe. Number 26. Beef tips over egg noodles. Chunks of beef round seared hard and braised in beef broth with sliced onions until the meat went tender enough to cut with the side of a fork. The gravy turned brown and rich from the drippings, and it got ladled over a pile of wide egg noodles on a heavy ceramic plate. Some stops added mushrooms from a can. Most did not bother. This was a steam table regular from Pennsylvania, clear across to Missouri, and it held under a heat lamp for hours without losing a thing. The noodles caught the gravy in their folds, and every forkful came up loaded. A full plate and change left over from a $5 bill. The menu at a truck stop was not a list. It was a map. Drive the I-10 corridor from Jacksonville to El Paso, and the food changed mile by mile. Fried catfish gave way to chicken-fried steak around the Louisiana-Texas line. Pork chops disappeared north of Kentucky and came back near St. Louis. The stops that lasted cooked what the land around them produced: catfish ponds in the Delta, beef feedlots on the plains, dairy farms in Wisconsin that kept the cream gravy thick. A driver who ran the same route long enough knew where he was by what came out of the kitchen. Grits meant south. Bean soup meant Midwest. The food told you where you were before the highway signs did. If you were going for a bucket of chicken, you definitely needed a shake. I mean, come on, it's a no-brainer of a combo, right? The two things you always get a good shake with are burgers and fried chicken. That was true back then too, and there was no better shake than the orange creamsicle. The flavor known as creamsicle was actually made in the 1920s by a company of the same name, and it caught on like a disease with people. Frozen orange and vanilla, who would have thought? If you held a gun to my head and asked me if that would sell hundreds of thousands, then I'd just laugh. By the 1960s, though, it had sold enough that it actually managed to build up nostalgia with its customers. The creamsicle was added to drive-ins throughout the 50s and 60s as an attempt to capitalize on that nostalgia for fans who were there for its birth in the 20s and for teens who were buying loads of chicken buckets. It went great with all kinds of food that was popular with the youth anyway. A bucket, your friends, some shakes and fries, that's a pretty close second to the American dream. Plus, if you got a bucket and the shake to go with it, you were looking at maybe $1.25 or $2.25 in total. The shake itself was for 25 or 75 cents in most places, and it was also extremely popular in hotter areas like Arizona and California. I mean, California wasn't hot enough for fires to erupt randomly back then, but you could still work up a real sweat, and the best way to deal with that summer heat was a frozen creamsicle. Number 28. Chicken and flat noodles. Not the kind from a box. These were thick, hand-cut egg noodles dropped into a pot of chicken broth that had been simmering with a whole bird since morning. The noodles soaked up the broth and turned soft and heavy, almost like dumplings but flatter. A truck stop cook in Indiana or Central Illinois started the pot before sunrise and served it straight through the dinner rush. You got a bowl heaped with shredded chicken and those fat noodles sitting in a shallow pool of broth with a sleeve of saltine crackers on the table. Comfort in a bowl for about $1.50. Pennsylvania might not have a lot of claims to fame, but this one is undoubtedly something that makes the state a national treasure. I didn't think about it either, but that place is actually responsible for coming up with the banana split. Yes, the banana split. The one we've seen so many times in cartoons. The ones we get commercials for all the time. The ones that you'd always want because it seemed like the dreamiest dessert of them all. Plus, having a banana split for just $1 was something entirely different. There was nothing that this dish didn't do right. It gave us style, flair, presentation, taste, affordability. It filled you up. Seriously, it was like everyone's poster boy for what a drive-in dessert should be. Promotional days for this were always the kind of Sundays where you'd nag your father to the moon and back to take out the car and the family for some banana splits. They had Sunday Sundays and Banana Split Wednesdays with discounted prices, and some parlors started having their own variations of the very popular split. Versions like the Brownie Banana Split became really popular, and when it was really at the peak of its popularity, each state had its own regional style of banana split that it became known for. It's still just as popular today, only 10 times more expensive, so somebody please take us back to better days. Number 20. Fried shrimp basket. Breaded butterfly shrimp fried to a deep gold and piled into a red plastic basket lined with wax paper. Fries underneath, cocktail sauce on the side, and a wedge of lemon that left your fingers smelling like citrus for the next 100 miles. This was the Gulf Coast special. Truck stops along the I-10 from Pensacola to Houston served shrimp that came off the boats that same morning. Further inland, the shrimp came frozen from a distributor, but the cook fried them the same way and nobody asked questions. A fried shrimp basket felt like eating out, like a Friday night, even on a Wednesday. Can't explain why his first name is Tiny, but Tiny Naylor was a Californian restaurateur who made one really important contribution to the cultural zeitgeist of America. That was the Patty Melt Burger, which was one of the first times a sandwich and a hamburger were combined to make a hybrid. It was done in the 40s and 50s, so it wasn't exactly too welcomed at first because fusion food hadn't taken off much as a concept. When people did start giving it a shot after it appeared in his Los Angeles fast food chains, though, it took over the nation. A patty melt craze was dominating the entirety of the United States. Don't ever underestimate the power a well-seasoned beef patty can hold. Drive-in diners had lines of cars waiting for the divine chance to get their hands on this angelic combination of rye bread, caramelized onions, and Swiss cheese. Sounds simple enough, right? Throughout the Midwest and East Coast, this burger carved a legacy for itself that almost none matched if we talk about the rest of the burgers that were coming out in that time period. It certainly put a Big Mac to shame. Plus, it got really popular with German-American communities because they already were deep believers in rye bread-based burgers. The West Coast, on the other hand, experimented with some other flavors, such as different styles of seasonings, but the patty melt did just as well there too. Diners even used to have Melt Mondays, where a patty melt burger, fries, and shake combo would go on a discount. Number 27. Fried catfish platter. Cornmeal-crusted fillets dropped into a deep fryer until the outside cracked when you bit into it and the inside stayed white and flaky. This was the Friday special at almost every truck stop south of the Mason-Dixon line, and plenty of them served it every day of the week. The platter came with hush puppies, coleslaw, and a wedge of lemon that most drivers ignored. Tartar sauce in a little paper cup. The catfish came from ponds in Mississippi, Alabama, and Arkansas, and the cook who battered them had a cornmeal mix that never got written down. Just cornmeal, salt, pepper, and a pinch of cayenne. If you keep on heading towards the southwest, you'll eventually come across diners with deals for Frito pies. You might wonder what that even is, and that's what I'm here to explain to you. So you see, there was this woman known as Daisy Doolin, whose son made Fritos in the first place. Charles Elmer Doolin had a pretty potent recipe for success when he first stumbled onto how to make a Frito corn chip in the 1930s, but it wasn't until his mom took the chips and beef chili and put it all together in a bowl that the Frito pie was first born. Yeah, I know, false advertising, right? It's not really a pie. But do we care for semantics in the face of such a culinary star? I wouldn't care much for labeling. You could call it a mimosa, and I think I'd still down several bowls of Frito pies in one go, and I know that's a sentiment a lot of Americans out there can share. Eventually, people started adding shredded cheese and chopped onions, olives, jalapenos, sour cream, and all sorts of condiments and toppings to the typical bowl to really give it some variety and flexibility as a dish. It worked too, since while it was already affordable at under $1 at most diners, it was now also really accessible. More than it originally was, you could throw anything into the bowl alongside the beef and Frito chips. Experimentative food really is the best. It's like Russian roulette but with calories. Did you just waste yours? Are you maybe about to strike gold? You'll never know until you get cooking. Number 30. Swiss steak. A tough cut of round steak pounded flat, dredged in seasoned flour and browned hard on both sides. Then it went under canned tomatoes, sliced onions, and green peppers, braising low and slow until the meat fell apart with a fork. Truck stops from Ohio to Oklahoma kept this on the steam table because it cost next to nothing and held heat for hours. The gravy turned thick and dark from the tomato juice mixing into the flour crust. 2 slices over mashed potatoes with a dinner roll on the side, and the whole plate ran under $2. A driver could eat it in 10 minutes and feel like he had eaten something his mother made. Let's rewind to the early days of the 60s to find out what fueled the excitement. The 1960s were definitely a great time for a fried chicken bucket. You're really used to only seeing the best of these come from KFC and Wendy's now, but it was actually really common to pull up to a drive-in diner and get a neat bucket. They were first introduced in the 1950s, and it was a pretty straightforward concept for many diners. It really fit convenience food and car culture at the time. Both of those were mixing together, as in more Americans were choosing to get dinners they could eat in their car while moving around. It meant that there was a big focus on portability and convenience when restaurants decided their menus, because they wanted to prove to every customer that, hey, we have the best food around and it's also the easiest to eat. Sounds like a pretty good bottom line for us as eaters, right? It definitely was. Those buckets of the 60s lined with paper going for just $1 or $1.50 were an incredibly affordable and convenient option for people. Working-class families and teenagers in particular loved to get these. Places like California, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas didn't just have a lot of teens around. They had a lot of car heads too. It was filled with guys riding the high of their first car that they saved up months for. They were also known for their spicy kick because most buckets used Southern-style seasonings and breadings. In the Midwest, they were a little tamer because people there preferred comfort food, not really a challenge of your spice tolerance. It became a great family meal to have at home or in the car, and diners made twice as many buckets of money for every 1 bucket of chicken. Number 22. Cube steak with onion gravy. A thin piece of round steak run through a mechanical tenderizer until the surface was covered in tiny crosshatch cuts, then dredged in flour and pan-fried. The onion gravy came from cooking down a sliced yellow onion in the same skillet until it went soft and brown, then building the gravy with drippings and a little water. The cube steak was the truck stop version of a cheap steak dinner. It gave you the chew and the flavor of beef without the price of a real cut. Cooks bought it in bulk for next to nothing and turned out a plate in under 8 minutes. Fried shrimp baskets were an American drive-in staple, especially in areas of the Midwest and South where there was a large fishing industry. Coastal cities with drive-ins thrived off of these the most, and where lots of people in the East Coast had their fried chicken buckets, a lot of people in the South enjoyed these shrimp ones instead. Shrimp was always a part of seafood tradition in America, as was fishing, so it was a taste that had already settled into the population well enough. Diners and drive-ins throughout the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic never shied away from showing off their shrimp bucket skills, and each had their own promotions like Shrimp Sunday or price cuts going on. In other words, competition was pretty healthy, and who benefits the most off of that? Foodies like you and me, my good friend. I don't know about you, but I would really like to go back to the days where a fried shrimp bucket was something I could easily afford. I mean, at just $150, that's a pretty big steal. Off the top of my head, though, you could get it even cheaper in some states like Florida and Louisiana. Number 21. Fried chicken gizzards. Tough little bundles of muscle from the bird, boiled until they turned tender, then battered and fried until the outside went dark and crunchy. They came in a basket with fries and a cup of white gravy for dipping. Most people outside of the South had never eaten one, but drivers who ran routes through Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi knew exactly what they were. The gizzard was the cheapest piece of the chicken, and a full basket cost under $1. The flavor was concentrated, deeper than a thigh, chewier than a wing. The drivers who loved them ordered them every single time they stopped. A truck driver in the 1970s burned through calories the way his rig burned through diesel. Not from heavy lifting, but from the strain of staying alert for 14, sometimes 16 hours behind the wheel. A truck stop meal had to do two things: fill the stomach fast and keep the driver going long enough to reach the next stop. That meant heavy proteins, thick gravies, and enough starch to slow digestion so a man felt full for hours. Light meals were for people who slept in their own beds. A driver needed weight on the plate. He needed food that sat in the gut and reminded him he was still a person, not just a pair of hands on a wheel. The best thing about a club sandwich is that you can really make it a stack of anything. I mean, yours could look like tomatoes, lettuce, and turkey, while mine could look like smoked sausage, mushrooms, and caramelized onions. You would call both of these a club sandwich, though. Where did they come from? And more importantly, why are they called club sandwiches? One of the most popular theories is that there was the Union Club in New York City, and that's apparently where the sandwich was first made in the 1880s. Nowadays, we think of it as fast food, just a casual sandwich to grab on your way to work. But back then, the Union Club was above most people's pay grades, and club sandwiches were considered luxury foods. It eventually spread way further than clubs and high-end hotels, though, and became something that you associate with diners and all kinds of fast food joints now. The club sandwiches you'd get in drive-ins weren't the most inspired ones. They didn't have a lot going on, but you could rely on them to fill your appetite. I mean, it was just a sandwich, and not exactly a really flashy one. It's supposed to have 3 layers of toasted white or wheat bread, and the fillings can be turkey, chicken, bacon, or just about anything. If there is one constant, it's probably mayonnaise. I don't think club sandwiches really align with the taste buds of today, but maybe I'm wrong. Do we have any club sandwich lovers watching right now? Number 17. Pepper steak. Strips of beef round cooked fast in a hot skillet with sliced green peppers, onions, and canned tomatoes served over white rice. This was Chinese-American cooking that had worked its way into truck stop kitchens by the mid-1970s, mostly through recipe cards tacked to the wall above the stove by a food service company. The beef was always round because round was cheap enough to slice into strips without losing money. The sauce was soy sauce thickened with cornstarch and water. A plate of pepper steak looked different from everything else on the board, and that was the appeal. After 5 days of gravy and mashed potatoes, a driver wanted something that tasted like it came from somewhere else. So by the 1960s, there were a lot of things going on in America culturally speaking. There was all this craze surrounding easy food, but there was also a lot of interest in exploring other cuisines and foreign taste palettes. Of course, since it is America, a mix of those two concepts was pretty inevitable. That's how drive-in pizza slices became really popular as a concept. The classic Italian slice was now something you would find at any roadside dinner, or, well, a cheap comfort food version of it. Restaurants like Pizza Hut and Shakey's Pizza also really popularized the idea of drive-in pizza slices. Hey, sometimes you don't feel like getting a whole pie. Sometimes you just wanted to share a few slices, and these were perfect for that. They were also pretty affordable. Most places sold them for around $0.15 to $0.35, and you could get pepperoni slices or even choose your toppings. A lot of people were some pretty die-hard fans of mushrooms, for example, and these even started giving some local pizzerias a headache because of the competition. Back then, you also had public movie setups where you could watch movies on projectors from the comfort of your car. Drive-in culture worked well with activities like that, and pizza slices were a pretty popular demand anyway for most diners. It was about time they got them on the menu, really. Number 29. Smothered pork chops. Bone-in chops browned in a cast-iron skillet, then drowned in a pan gravy made from the drippings, a pour of milk, and enough flour to thicken it into something that stuck to the back of a spoon. The gravy went over the chops and over the rice, and most drivers finished every grain. This was southern truck stop country from the Carolinas down to the Gulf, where pork was cheaper than beef and gravy was a food group. The chops were thin because a thick chop took too long when you had 12 drivers lined up at the counter. So they pounded them flat, fried them fast, and buried them in gravy so nobody noticed how thin they were. Did you know a funny fact about Sonny's? Whether you love chocolate ones or butterscotch ones, we might not have ever had them if not for one petty law. See, in the early 1900s, there was something called blue laws, which basically were like a trial version of prohibition but for sodas. You couldn't buy a soda on Sunday for some reason. I don't know. The logic escapes me too. Maybe you'll figure out why this was there. If you do know the history behind these laws, drop it in the comments. Anyway, apparently, chocolate and butterscotch sundaes originated as a result of these laws because people needed to get their sweet tooth filled somehow. Most sundaes were pretty cheap too, for usually 30 or 45 cents. It was one of the mainstays of the lineups of most ice cream parlors, and daily special discounts also meant that they would continue to be a really popular item. In states like California especially, there was always a strong demand for a chilled sundae. It took that California heat off of your shoulders, you know? And in the Midwest, which had a booming drive-in culture, people loved to take away a sundae or two and have it on a drive. Things like that were fundamental parts of being and growing up in America back then. Number 24. Fried chicken dinner. A 2-piece or 3-piece plate with a thigh, a leg, and sometimes a wing, all battered and fried until the skin turned golden brown and crackled when you bit through it. The chicken sat in a warming tray, and the pieces closest to the heat lamp got extra crispy on one side. Mashed potatoes with gravy and a scoop of coleslaw came standard. The breading was thick because thick batter stayed crispy longer under the lamp, and the seasoning was salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and a paprika. The fried chicken dinner was usually the most expensive plate on the menu, around $2.25 in 1973. Drivers ordered it on payday. One of the most iconic things we can talk about as far as drive-in food culture goes are cheeseburgers. They were simple, but they were versatile. A cheeseburger could have been anything, from a beef patty with cheese and tomato to a full-blown burger with mushrooms, pickles, olives, and all sorts of sauces and toppings. It was really what you made of it, and some diners became known for their cheeseburgers especially. A lot of them even had promotions that were centered exclusively around cheeseburgers and offered them at a discount. Plus, they were one of the few items that all age groups could just enjoy without worries. Whether you were a teen or a kid, an adult or a middle-aged man coming home from another shift at the factory, a cheeseburger would lift up anyone's spirits. Number 18. Veal cutlet. A thin piece of veal pounded flat, breaded with cracker crumbs, and pan-fried in butter until both sides turned crisp and golden. It came with a lemon wedge and a side of spaghetti or mashed potatoes depending on where you stopped. Veal was still affordable in the 1970s. A truck stop outside of Chicago or Milwaukee could get it from local suppliers for less than beef, and the breading stretched a small piece of meat into a plate that looked like a real dinner. The breading did all the work. It made the cutlet look bigger, soaked up the butter, and gave the plate a richness plain grilled meat could not match. By the late 1980s, veal prices climbed and it vanished from truck stop menus almost overnight. The best thing to go with your cheeseburger was often a chocolate malt milkshake, and it used to be served in these special metal mixing cups so that it could be kept cold for longer. It was advertised as a special shake, so some diners charged a bit more for it. It was really a big part of the whole drive-in diner aesthetic, though. Neon lights, burgers wrapped in papers, flashing tail lights in cars, the smell of oil and potatoes, chocolate milkshakes frozen just right. It was a big part of fast food culture as a whole. Chocolate milkshakes were arguably some of the most popular shakes to order. The shake was pretty thick too, so it was more common for people to sip it slowly, which made it perfect to go along with your burger. It's funny that this was actually a nutritional supplement made by a chemist known as James Horlick, but when people discovered that adding malt actually makes the milkshake itself taste better, this started popping up in soda fountains and drive-ins throughout the country. Number 15. Beef stew. Chunks of chuck roast, quartered potatoes, sliced carrots, and celery in a thick brown gravy, seasoned with nothing fancier than salt, pepper, and a bay leaf. The stew lived on the back of the stove and got better every hour. A morning batch tasted fine by noon and perfect by 6 in the evening. The meat broke down until it barely held together, and the potatoes absorbed the gravy and turned almost translucent around the edges. You got a bowl with a biscuit or 2 slices of white bread for sopping. Some stops charged 75 cents for a bowl and $1 for a plate over rice. The cheapest hot dinner on the menu and the hardest one to ruin. How do you get your kid to stop nagging you? It's a serious dilemma, and one that we've all experienced before. Some things are tried and tested, time-worn methods though, and they work just as well now as they did back then. It's comforting to know that even 60 years ago, the way to keep little runts in line was corn dogs. Speaking of lines, there was always a massive one outside drive-ins and diners whenever they would include corn dogs as a part of kids' meal specials, or whenever corn dog nights were happening. You've probably noticed this by now, but diners and restaurants back then were a lot more forgiving with their promotions than they are now. Well, that's fair. They didn't have to pay $1,000 and up in rent for a janky one-bedroom apartment either. Rent prices weren't the only thing that were better off then, though. It was also just a lot easier to offer discounts because supply was pretty cheap. Nowadays, it just costs more to make these same things. That KFC bucket 10 years ago was substantially cheaper, and so were corn dogs. They were festival favorites too, and they became closely associated with just about any definition of joy or happiness that a person could have. Long story short, there wasn't ever an occasion that wasn't better off once it included corn dogs, and there was no occasion where corn dogs weren't a good idea. Number 16. Country-style ribs. Not actual ribs. Thick-cut pieces from the blade end of a pork loin, bone-in, braised in a roasting pan with bottled barbecue sauce until the meat pulled apart and the sauce turned into a sticky, dark glaze. A cook could load a pan with 20 pounds of these before the lunch rush, slide it into the oven, and pull it out 4 hours later with enough to serve through dinner. They came with baked beans and coleslaw, and the barbecue sauce got everywhere. On your fingers, on the table, on the napkin wadded up next to your coffee cup. Country-style ribs were a mess, and drivers loved them for it. 25 snacks from a parking lot that never asked for a reservation. Every one of them was made by someone standing over a flat grill in a small kitchen with no air conditioning, and every one of them is gone from the menu boards that replaced the hand-painted ones. If you grew up eating any of these, try making one this week. The tamale spread, the fried pie, the onion burger. Choose one. Make it in your own kitchen and see what comes back to you. And if someone you know would remember these, send them this video. Hit subscribe if you have not already, because we are not done going back. I will see you in the next one.